Good evening and welcome to another one of our Facebook Live programs this evening. Delighted to be with you again. And tonight we're going to be talking about a different topic than COVID-19. Many of our programs in the past months have been, of course, about the biggest thing that we're dealing with from a public health point of view. And tonight we're going to take a step away from that and talk about a different issue that is still very relative to and relevant to our area here. It's an issue of federal jurisdiction, but one that really resonates here at home, especially for the area around the village that we know of as Port McNicoll. So tonight I'm going to just step you through how this is going to go tonight and tell you a little bit about what we have in store. It will take you through where we are with the SS Keewatin and this wonderful artifact that we have at our back door. I'm going to have with us tonight two special guests that are going to join me to provide their take and background as to the campaigns and the information that has been brought forward for us to discuss this important historical destination attraction in our area. That includes Fred Addis, who is a curator of the Friends of the SS Keewatin, rather, and Dan Travers, who is the leader and, in fact, the one who sponsored the campaign called Keep Keewatin Home. So I'm going to start with a little background on, where what took us to this spot here in 2021 and where things stand. And at the same time, Fred and Dan are going to provide a little bit more information on the process that's at hand as we look forward. So once we go through each of those parts, we'll then go to the most important part of the show, and that will be a hearing from you and your questions as we go through the next three segments. If you have any questions, you have the opportunity to pose those to us, and then the three of us will field those questions and do our best to answer those in the time that we have towards the end of the show. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Curtis Schluter, who is my assistant here in the Orillia office, and he's going to describe how you can get those questions in to Dan and Fred and I at the end of the show.
So thank you, Bruce. As with our previous town halls, we will have that question and answer section towards the end of the broadcast. So if at any point throughout the town hall you do have a question, just make sure you add it to the chat. I'll be keeping an eye on the chat so I can get any of those questions over to Bruce and our other guests. As always, please try to keep the questions as brief as possible. If they're too long, they can sometimes get cut off, so we don't end up seeing the full question that you're asking. Since today's town hall is also focusing on the SS Keewatin, we're only going to be putting those questions to the group. If there are any other questions on any other topic, we will follow up with you after the broadcast. And with our previous town halls, we usually get to about 10 questions or so, but we're going to do our best to get to as many as possible. If we don't get to your question and it is related to the Keep Keewatin campaign, we will make sure to get those answers posted to the Keep Keewatin Home website after the town hall is over. So with that, I'll just pass it back over to Bruce.
Thanks very much, Curtis, and great to have you sort of give the sort of intro to our question section. Now, let me get into the first part of our segment here this evening, and that is the background on the SS Keewatin. So many viewers will already know where Port McNicoll is. That's along Highway 12 on your way just a little bit east of Midland on the right-hand side, one of the three main villages in Tay Township located on the south shore of Georgian Bay. From the early to mid-20th century, Port McNicoll was known for its importance as a terminus for Great Lakes shipping, eastern Canada to the west, and that's both for goods and passengers. In that era, it had Canada's second largest grain elevator and a railway trestle that ran into port that was one of the longest wooden structures in North America. Up to the late 1940s, the CPR operated 5 ships, including the 2 sister ships, SS Assiniboia and SS Keewatin. From the 50s onward, only those 2 ships remained in operation, and they did so until 1965. In 1966, the Keewatin was sold to a reclamation company, but a fellow by the name of R.J. Peterson from Douglas, Michigan, saved her from going to the scrapyard in 1967, and it became a museum ship in Mr. Peterson's hometown on Lake Michigan. It was from Douglas, Michigan, that a campaign in 2010, 2011, led by a former employee of the ship, Eric Conroy of Port McNicoll, and Skyline Investments, the then owner of the abandoned CPR lands in port, to bring the Keewatin home to Port McNicoll in 2012. The SS Keewatin is the only one left, not just of that fleet, but of any fleet of that era that can still be viewed and experienced up close and in person. From 2012 on, the Friends of the Keewatin, a group of marine history enthusiasts and community volunteers, opened Keewatin for visits and tours that continued each season through the summer of 2019. And during that time, they also saw to her restoration. Thousands of volunteer hours and the addition of hundreds of artifacts and elements further improved the story of the SS Keewatin and generally Great Lakes steam-operated passenger vessels of the late 19th and early 20th century. In that period, 2012 to 2019, the Keewatin attracted tens of thousands of visitors. The last season in 2020, last summer, public tours were, of course, canceled, like most all of the area's big attractions. This, of course, due to the COVID-19 pandemic. And that sort of brings us to current day, where looking forward, the Friends of the Keewatin are engaged in a campaign to keep the ship here and make sure that she can succeed as an ongoing historic attraction, the only one of its kind in existence in the world today. So now to bring you up to speed on the way forward, I'm going to welcome in Fred Addis. Fred is, as I mentioned, the curator of the SS Keewatin. He's a retired museum professional, most recently the curator and manager of the Stephen Leacock Museum in Orillia. He also served as Lakehead University's special advisor to the principal on matters of arts and culture, and has had a lifetime of experience with marine history from Port Colborne and the Welland area to Harbourfront Centre in Toronto. Please welcome Fred Addis.
Well, thank you very much, Bruce, and we really appreciate you hosting tonight's event and the opportunity to bring our unique story to a much broader audience. Simply put, ladies and gentlemen, we've reached an impasse. Despite the goodwill of hundreds of volunteers and over 12,000 interested persons who have signed the petition, the future of our ship, the ship we love, the SS Keewatin, is still uncertain at Port McNicoll and under serious threat of being moved by its owners, Skyline Investments. But let's take a step back. Amid so much goodwill and community support, how did we get here? Some of you will know that back in 2006, Skyline Investments, a Canadian-based but internationally owned developer, purchased some 1,100 acres of land on the shores of Georgian Bay at Port McNicoll, in fact, the former Canadian Pacific Railway terminal lands. And there was talk of a development that included 1,400 residential units, a hotel, a convention center, shops, retail, the whole works. Enter the SS Keewatin. As the centerpiece for their proposed development, Skyline purchased the Keewatin, and it returned home to Canada and Port McNicoll in 2012, as Bruce described. The last Edwardian passenger ship afloat in the world, beautifully restored, open to the public, back in its home port of Port McNicoll. Now, as a part of the agreement to bring the ship back to Canada, Skyline agreed to donate Keewatin to a charity named in honor of R.J. Peterson, the American who'd rescued the ship from the scrapper's torch back in the 60s. Skyline set up the charity in Peterson's name, and the charity, through its volunteers, the Friends of Keewatin, have managed, operated, and painstakingly restored the ship these past 8 years. But Skyline held on to the ship, as they do today, and have been in the process of facilitating the donation of the ship to a charity since 2018. Now, I'm not sure if anyone expected Skyline to simply hand the ship over to the charity as their purchase agreement required. And to be clear, the charity has the legal ability and could write Skyline a charitable donation receipt today for the appraised value of something north of $40 million as a donation for a gift in kind. Instead, a different route was contemplated when it was discovered that a special tax exemption could be had if the ship was designated as a Category B cultural asset through the Cultural Property Export and Import Act as determined by the Federal Department of Canadian Heritage. Now, by this method, Skyline could achieve what was described to me as a taxation credit for an amount in line with the ship's appraised value, a value which would presumably be vetted by the Canada Revenue Agency. So Skyline, coordinated by its legal team, they assembled the application material and submitted it to Canadian Heritage using the Keewatin charity as the named applicant. Long and short, the application submitted by Skyline came up short, specifically in the areas of conservation, preservation, and finances. But not to worry, the process allows for such shortcomings, and the applicant can reapply after a calendar year. Subsequently, with answers to the deficiencies at hand and having secured a $1 million financial backstop in support of our designation efforts, we were ready to resubmit the supplementary information last fall. But upon contacting Canadian Heritage, we learned that our original application had been pulled and a new application had been submitted for the same cultural asset, the SS Keewatin, by the Marine Museum of the Great Lakes at Kingston. And that, ladies and gentlemen, that is where we are today. Kingston application for Category B status is now being reviewed by Canadian Heritage, and we can't submit an alternative to Kingston's proposal until theirs has been considered and decided upon. Now, we're not here to determine the merits of Kingston versus Port McNicoll, although people I've talked to in Kingston agree that an historic artifact is best left where possible, where its role and purpose is rooted. That's why we have local and regional museums. It's where an asset or artifact's heritage and cultural significance is best amplified, in short, left in its home, in this case, Port McNicoll. And to be clear, there's not a provincial or federal grant program, not a single dollar for which the good folks at Kingston may qualify, for which we don't also qualify in Port McNicoll. It's clear that Skyline wants to divest itself of its Port McNicoll lands and the ship, and we think we're the best way for that to happen. We want to work with them to put a sound business plan in place that not only ensures the preservation of the ship, but also honors the relationship of the ship to the community, to Port McNicoll. In the end, some benefit must accrue to our volunteers for their investment of time, their talents and treasures, all contributed, incidentally, with the understanding that the ship would be permanently preserved at Port McNicoll. No one disputes that these volunteers have, by their efforts, increased the value of this incredible heritage asset. It simply wouldn't have happened without their effort. All in all, it's a complex set of circumstances and at times extremely difficult to navigate. But in the end, it's Skyline's decision. Regardless of what Canadian Heritage says about the ship's status as a cultural asset, Skyline, the ship's owners, will decide its fate. But we're not standing pat, waiting for the Canadian Heritage shoe to drop. Friends of Keewatin has a new management team that's working very hard to help us achieve the goal of securing Keewatin's future in North Simcoe, right here in Port McNicoll. We're not real estate developers. We're not tourism resort operators or hotel owners. It's not surprising, perhaps, that our vision for Keewatin and Port McNicoll is different. Our vision is different because it is community-based, it's long-term, it's balanced, and we feel it deserves a chance. We look forward to welcoming you aboard soon. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Fred. And I'm sure that this is going to generate a number of good questions that we'll handle at the end of the show. And you're absolutely right. This is not at all a simple scenario, and sometimes often difficult to sort of find the best way forward. Now, before we get to our next guest, Mr. Dan, I want to invite and welcome our next guest, Dan Travers. Dan is a resident of Port McNicoll, and he is also got a professional background in history. He's the author of 2 books on public history and memory. He's a liberal arts professor at Georgian College, and I first met Dan through his service at Branch 80, the Royal Canadian Legion branch in Midland, where he volunteers and serves the community, as so many Legion members do throughout our region. So please, I should have mentioned actually, Dan is the leader. I think I indicated this at the outset, but Dan is the man in our community who launched the program Keep Keewatin Home. Please welcome Dan Travers.
Thank you very much, Bruce. It's appreciated. You're absolutely right. When we learned about the intention to send the SS Keewatin to Kingston, I and several volunteers founded the Keep Keewatin Home campaign with the sole aim of keeping the vessel where it belongs. Our growing team are united in the conviction that the Keewatin belongs right here in Port McNicoll. You know, the fact that our very small community here in North Simcoe possesses the only Edwardian steamship in existence in the world is something that we should all be very proud of. And the story of the Key is the story of this region and of Port McNicoll. It is the ship that literally built the town. And it's also the last vestige of our maritime history. It forms an important link to our past alongside sites like St. Mary among the Hurons, the Marja Shrine, Discovery Harbour, and it's something we really can't afford to lose. But as local residents, we also believe that the Keewatin should, if you pardon the terrible pun, anchor the economic well-being of the community. For too long, Port McNicoll has seen a decline in infrastructure and investment. Really, since the Keewatin left in the 1960s, the town has struggled to regain its former status as the Chicago of the North. And so the arrival of the Keewatin in 2012 was seen as a bit of a watershed moment in the town's history. And we firmly believe that in addition to maintaining possession of this important historical vessel, that it should also be part of the economic revitalization of the whole area as well. So our organization, Keep Keewatin Home, in conjunction, of course, with people like Fred, Friends of Keewatin, have been devising strategies which would do exactly that. At the same time, of course, we have had overwhelming support from the community. We now have over 12,000 individual signatures on a change.org petition. We now have over 1,200 on Bruce's Commons petition. We've sent out over 500 window signs, which you can see all over the township and all over North Simcoe. Many times more than that downloaded, I should say, from the website at keepkeewatinhome.ca. We've also had letters of support from dozens of historians, charitable tourism organizations, former ships captains. And I think what's so important in this campaign, and what especially encourages our volunteers, is the personal connection that local residents have with the vessel. Every day I get emails and letters of support from people who served or sailed on the ship. And the idea that the vessel could be taken away from Port McNicoll and sent to a place that really has no connection with its history is heartbreaking to them. Just the other day, in something akin to perhaps a happier ending to the film Titanic, I even had one lady email me saying she had actually met her husband aboard the SS Keewatin on the 2-day journey from Thunder Bay to Port McNicoll. They had fallen in love on the vessel, later got married, and were still married to this day, 60 years later. Many of you who have signed either the Commons petition or the Change petition have also left comments about the vessel. And I just wanted to take the time to share some of these with you. This is from Janice in Port McNicoll. I live in Port. My kids love the ship. It is their favorite feature of our town. They're always requesting to go for walks past and around the waterfront by the ship. It would be a shame to see it go. It has been here since we moved to Port, and this town just wouldn't be the same without it. Verna from Port McNicoll writes, Tay Township and especially Port McNicoll, the original home and base of the Keewatin, deserve to be able to hold on to their heritage and history. I can see a small part of the Keewatin from my home, and I am proud that my community has something so distinct and one of a kind. Leave us our ship, please. We should be building our community, not sending it away. And a lot of people who signed the petitions also highlight the importance to the area of local tourism and Port McNicoll provenance. Kirsty from Lee in England writes, I visited from the UK and I feel it would be wrong for it to be anywhere else. Stacy from Elmvale writes, local heritage matters, ! Tourism opportunities matter. Keep the Keewatin intact and in her home port. And Mary Jane from Barrie writes, visit her just once and you will want to go back. And I think about these a lot. We believe that the importance of the vessel remaining in its home berth and the support we've had in this initiative has been clearly demonstrated. So, what can you do to keep Keewatin home? Well, I think the most important thing, and certainly what we're asking you to do today, is sign Bruce's Commons petition. It's on the parliamentary website, and of course, it closes on April 9th. We want as many people to sign that petition and give Bruce the backing that the biggest backing that we can get. We also ask you to share these petitions with your network, post it on Twitter, post it on Facebook, send it out in an email, put it on Instagram. Get as many people, folks, involved as possible. Secondly, reach out to us for a window sign. You can download or print one from the website, or you can email us at keepkeewatinhome@gmail.com for contactless delivery to your front door. We'll also shortly have lawn signs available. So once the ground is thawed, we'll maybe be able to get some lawn signs out on people's lawns as well. One of the other things that you can do is either email or snail mail the Minister of Canadian Heritage, Stephen Guilbeault, with your stories about why the Keewatin should stay. And I should mention that if you put something in an envelope and send it to the Honourable Stephen Guilbeault, Minister of Canadian Heritage, you don't even need to put a stamp on the envelope. Just send it right off. And lastly, you can find all sorts of other ways on our website, keepkeewatinhome.ca, and learn more about the SS Keewatin at sskeewatin.com. And really, we appreciate everything that's being done to assist our campaign. We're exceptionally grateful, of course, to you, Bruce, and all of the community for your incredible support.
Thank you very much, Dan. That is great. Really appreciate that. And listen to you and to all of the people who have taken the time to sign either of the petitions. Thank you for adding your name to our efforts here. And all of it is hoped, as we'll describe, as a way to urge the Canadian Minister of Canadian Heritage, to give us some time to get another proposal in front, both of the Canadian Heritage, but as well to Skyline, to make the case to keep the Keewatin here in Port McNicoll. Now, as Dan described, the House of Commons petition, e-petition that is, E3034, is now open for signature, but not for too much longer, until the 9th of April. That's a week from this Friday. There's about a week and a half left. To be a signatory to a House of Commons petition, there's no age minimum. You just need to be a citizen or resident of Canada. You'll be asked to provide certain information once you go to the petition site. You'll need to supply your email address and accept the terms of use, that sort of thing. But essentially, it's really easy. You can quickly just go to, if you Google the e-petitions Canada, the Canadian Petitions website will show up there for you, the link to it. Go to that website, and right on the first screen, you'll see a search bar there. You can type in the words Keewatin on there, and it'll show up. You'll see the petition show up that's active and open. Click on the actual petition link, and that opens up the screen that you can just fill in the information. It's very, very easy to take the steps through there. And of course, if you run into any problems with that, don't hesitate to shoot us an email or a phone call, and we'll be glad to help you out with that as well. Each signature we receive is a public show of support that I will take forward to the Minister of Heritage, the Honourable Stephen Guilbeault, to urge his cooperation, as I said, in giving us some time here to get a second proposal, an alternative proposal, in front of him. So that's what our petition calls for. And at this point, I think we're going to ask to see if it looks like we do have our panelists back here. So we're happy at this point to take some questions. And I see that this is where Curtis does his work, and he takes comments from our viewers. And we're going to go to the first question, and it's from Rena. And she asks, how dangerous would the trip from port to Kingston be? Is this a valid concern to leverage the, in other words, the movement? Is it precarious or a risk to the actual vessel itself if it were ending up having to go to Kingston? And I think I'll maybe bring. I'm going to invite Fred for his comments on that, because I think as a curator he has looked at some of that. So Fred, any thoughts on that question? Rena's excellent question.
Yes, thank you, Rena, for that. And first of all, I'd like to point out that I'm neither a marine surveyor or a naval architect, but I have been through the ship. And yes, I do have a concern about what a trip of that nature, for example, to Kingston, might do for the hull of the ship. There have been some outstanding issues from previous marine surveys that have never been addressed. And consequently, I think it would really be dangerous to move the ship without a comprehensive marine survey, which, interestingly enough, I feel would be required as well by the agencies like the St. Lawrence Seaway before you could ever even begin a tow. So the ship is in need of a comprehensive, up-to-date survey, in my opinion.
Yeah, so not an uncomplicated thing to do, and
No.
I mean, probably doable, but obviously certain precautions would have to be taken, would you say, Fred, to make sure that it could be done so safely and without any risk to the vessel itself?
No, that's absolutely correct, Bruce. In fact, some people will say, well, the ship got to Port McNicoll from Michigan. Yes, it did, with some very stringent requirements on the part of the United States Coast Guard specifically, but this is some 8 years on, and as I said, there were some specific areas addressed previous to its departure from Michigan that were never really addressed with any kind of remedy, and consequently, I feel that the ship, in my opinion, not as a naval architect or a marine surveyor, but as curator, in my opinion, I don't think the ship is safe to travel.
Yeah. And we have a related question from Garnet asking how expensive it would be to complete this voyage. And he points out, rightly so, he obviously knows a thing or two about the ship. And we should let our viewers know that, of course, the Keewatin no longer has the ability to power herself. So the motors, the engines, the whole propulsion system is still there, but it's not operable. So even when it came back from Lake Michigan, it essentially had to come back under tow. So, but Gary, Garnet, I'm not too sure what the cost would be. Fred, have you any inkling there at all as to what we'd be looking at to do that?
I've had some ballpark numbers from a number of people, and the numbers have ranged anywhere between $700,000 to, I even heard $1.2 million. But the ship will need special care, especially when transiting the locks of the Welland Canal to get down to Lake Ontario.
Yeah, thank you, Fred. Okay, now we have another, not really so much a question, but a comment from Gary, who indicates he's from Toronto and has connections in Midland. He's signed the petition and indicates that this isn't a case of keeping a ship in any one port. This is one of the finest museums in Ontario. He's referring to the Keewatin, built up by the Friends of Keewatin in North Simcoe. They all deserve our support. Keep Keewatin home. Dan, any comments on that? Great comment here by Gary.
Yeah, and thanks, Gary. I think you echo the sentiments of an awful lot of our supporters. The almost 13,000 now on the change petition, and many of those who signed Bruce's petition as well. That's what we're hearing, right? Is that this is not just an economic opportunity; it's a tourism opportunity. It is our heritage. And, there is something to be said about keeping heritage objects in the place where they have that provenance. One of the things that always distresses me about this conversation of the Keewatin moving away from Port McNicoll is, the only reason we're having that conversation is because it is a vessel. It is, an inherently movable object. And, if we were talking about tearing down St. Marie among the Hurons stick by stick and moving it to, let's say, Niagara Falls, simply because more people might see it there or they had more funding. That would be completely and utterly unthinkable. So, this is a part of Port McNicoll history. It's important to us as much as it's important to the people of Ontario and, of course, to all Canadians as well.
Great comment on that, and a good analogy, quite honestly. Now we have another question from Doug, who asks, who actually owns the boat at this point? Is it Skyline Investments or the company that now runs the development? Did they purchase it? I'm going to go to Fred for that one. I know, Fred, you may have some insights on that you could share.
Well, that was based on a conversation with an official from Skyline on Friday. He informed us that he doesn't actually own the land, and that really clouded the waters further. In fact, there was an offer to purchase the land from a private company called CIM, C-I-M, I believe, and that agreement to purchase it is in default, as I understand it, and consequently, the property is in some state of limbo. But I still believe Skyline has some rights in that transaction. But as far as the ship specifically goes, the ship, to my knowledge, is still entirely owned by Skyline Investments.
Okay. So yeah, and of course you were referring there to the lands in and around, as we referred in our comments, the so-called CPR lands, what's left of them, and this of course has been the subject of part of the potential real estate development that we referred to. So yes, I mean we're not party to some of what those transactions look like. That's the business of Skyline and potentially other firms or developers that might be looking at for potential development down the road. For the time being, our focus is really on the vessel itself, and I mean it is on that point. It's encouraging to see that the Township of Tay, for example, has recognized that the Keewatin is this right, Dan? I think they recognize that it's a legitimate feature of or heritage recognition, at least by the Township of Tay.
That's correct. So about a month ago, we approached the Township of Tay for a heritage designation under the Ontario Heritage Act. They were very receptive and voted unanimously, which was great, from Tay Council to explore that particular option. They ultimately decided, based upon the rules of the Ontario Heritage Act, that they could not designate the ship, but would instead recognize the ship. One of the big reasons that they could not designate the ship is because it is not considered to be a piece of real property, i.e. real estate. Because it is a vessel and it is inherently movable, that wasn't something they could do. So we have had it recognized by the Township of Tay, and we thank Mayor Walker and all council for that. We are still pursuing the designation option, which is a conversation we've had with MP Dunlop, and hope to have a meeting soon with Tourism Minister McLeod.
And I understand MPP Dunlop is certainly supportive. I mean, normally the provinces take a look at issues, especially around tourism development, attracting more visitors. They know how important it is to our region, especially we've seen right across the board. I mean, tourism is one facet of the industry and economy that we have here, but it's a healthy part of it. Now, Sheena has a good question here. We're petitioning the House of Commons. She's right about that. But is there anything the community could do to pressure Skyline from helping to keep Keewatin Home? I'm going to say at the outset, I think so. I think we're trying to. We're not making this about. I mean, the owner, as Fred indicated in his remarks. I mean, they ultimately will decide the best way forward. It's incumbent on us as a community, and I say us. I mean, I'm including. Our panelists here, but in particular the Friends of Keewatin, that large group of volunteers and history enthusiasts that have put so much into the vessel this past 7 or 8 years. It's for them to make the case for the ship to stay here in Port McNicoll. And what we're asking the Minister of Heritage to do is really just give us a bit of a time spell here that we can, the Friends of the Keewatin, can put another proposal on the table for consideration. It's as much as providing another option for the owner as well, not just the Minister of Heritage, but the owner. So I hope that explains it, but we're not making this or in any way trying to suggest for a moment that Skyline is shouldn't make a certain decision. I think it's incumbent on the community to make that case, and I think we'll leave it at that. Mackenzie asks, is there any way to get more actively involved? I'm not sure if Mackenzie is him or her, so I'm just going to say I'm a public historian who is from Port McNicoll and who has worked as a guide on the ship for a couple of years, starting when it returned home in 2012. And thank you, Mackenzie, for your service in that respect. As far as other ways to get involved, I think we've covered that off reasonably well. Dan or Fred, anything to add there that they can do? Like, certainly signing the petitions. There's a timeline there involved, but can you think of anything, gentlemen, that we should respond there to Mackenzie's question?
Yeah, welcome aboard, Mackenzie, and thank you ever so much for your support. Why don't you email me directly at keepkeewatinhome@gmail.com. Certainly make sure that you sign the petitions, get a sign, but we might find some other tasks for you to help as well.
That's great. We have another question. I'm not sure who this comes from. Somebody that will probably remain anonymous for these purposes. And it's I shouldn't say that. Let me back up. This is someone from the Portorama Family Festival. So just so you know, the Portorama Festival always happens on the long weekend in May. It's an amazing gathering of people in Port McNicoll. We get together, we have a parade. The Lions Club sell these amazing hot dogs, and it's just a wonderful, wonderful Saturday in Port McNicoll. So they're saying that so many local people have donated personal items and artifacts to the ship under the premise that it was staying in port. What happens to all these treasures if it leaves? Now, I'm just thinking here, Fred, now you may know that, but we've also got another guest with us who's just kind of backstage here, who's been part of the Friends of Keewatin for a number of years, a fellow by the name of Wayne Coombs. And we might even, I'll let you get started there, Fred, but maybe we're going to turn to Wayne and see if he has some thoughts on what's the status of those sort of personal artifacts and items that have been donated to the ship. I see Wayne is there with us now, so jump in, Wayne, and then Dan, and Fred, if you have some other thoughts, maybe we can add that.
Sure. The donations were made as expressed with the understanding the ship would stay, and that's certainly what we hope and expect to happen. In the unfortunate event that the ship is going to leave, we expect that we'll have an opportunity provided to us by the ship's owner to offer to those people who want their donations returned to acquire them. We have records of every donation, and we can identify the people involved. I think that's all we really need to say at this point. That's not the outcome we're counting on.
Yeah, no, exactly. And well said. And as the curator of the ship, Fred, any other thoughts on that?
Well, no, just exactly what Wayne was saying, Bruce, in that we will personally be making contact with each and every donor for whom we have a contact information to ensure that we know exactly what their wishes are pertaining to any donation of artifacts to the ship.
That's great. Okay, well, thank you for that. And Wayne, thanks for coming in at a moment's notice to sort of add some extra context to our presentation here this evening. And Wayne has been there from the early days of the Friends of Keewatin to help this amazing group of volunteers that have put so much into this, the care and upkeep and restoration of the vessel these past years. Now, we have a comment from Valerie who says the issue is an emotional one for many of us who want to capture the past we shared with our fathers and mothers who worked on the Keewatin. So clearly Valerie has a family connection there with people who were part and parcel of its operation, not unlike Mr. Conroy, who had, wrote a wonderful book, just reaching for the name of it near, Steak in a Drawer or something like that, I think it was. This amazing book, recounting his experiences as a waiter working on the ship in the last, and probably among the last years that it operated out of Port McNicoll. Dan or Fred, any comments on Valerie's comment here?
Go ahead, Dan.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, every single day, Valerie, I feel that. Every single day I have someone reach out, and even in COVID times, in the limited amount of time I actually get out of my house nowadays, every once in a while I will run into someone and they'll be like, "Are you the Dan Travers that's helping to lead the Keewatin campaign?" And, "Oh, my grandfather served, or my grandfather sailed, or worked in the warehouses, or things of this nature." And I think that is something that's very, very important to this community. It's very, very important to our volunteers. It's very important to our campaign, and really something that the good folks in Kingston, who have the Maritime Museum there, that family connection, that generational aspect to connection that they have to the ship just isn't there. And so I really appreciate it when people come up and talk about their personal and their family connections to the ship. And I know that we're doing everything that we can to keep the ship here and keep those connections going. Absolutely.
Speaking of, Fred, did you have any other thoughts on that, on Valerie's sort of family connection there?
Well, yeah, I think it's really important that people understand there is a very tight-knit community around the people that have sailed or interacted with a ship like this. I remarked a few months ago that I was in several shops in Midland, and every time someone looked at my jacket or saw the reference to Keewatin, they, I had to be prepared to stop for 15, 20 minutes and hear their unique story about immense pride in the association with this vessel and how it is connected to the community. But it even goes beyond that. Some would say that the ship would not have been purchased by Peterson, the American, had it not been for a gentleman from Illinois who photographed the Canadian Pacific Railway steamers as well as locomotives back in the 1960s. This guy's name is David Plowden, and he's still alive today. I talk to him once a week in the hospital in Illinois, and he is absolutely passionate about seeing the ship stay in Port McNicoll. Those iconic images, which are at Yale University, that hang in the Smithsonian in the United States, that so ably portray that great era of steam transportation, specifically with Keewatin and her sister ship Assiniboia. There's so much to be inspired about. It's such an incredible visual record, and the fact that we have the ship right here in our own community and can enhance that whole history, I think it's a challenge to everyone in the community to make sure that this ship stays right where it is. And we're really inspired by those stories, not just the local ones, but from afar as well.
Yeah, well said. Now this will be our final question that Ryan asks. Beyond the political path, is there a way to raise this issue in the public consciousness outside of our region? The Keewatin did appear in programs like Murdoch Mysteries, for example. Is there a way to mobilize a broader community around this? For example, past visitors to our region that have been to the ship. So maybe some thoughts on that. I mean, Dan has come to this, in fairly recent years, but I'm sure that the Friends of Keewatin have kept records of past visitors. And either of you wish to sort of weigh in on Ryan's question on this?
Yeah, that's something actually we've been pursuing. We have multiple different volunteers doing things. We have one individual right now who's doing presentations to different Probus groups. We've also engaged media, local and national and provincial media. We were talking, for example, to CBC Ontario Morning just a few weeks ago. But realistically, folks, the best way to get the message out there is by sharing it with your network by word of mouth, right? Any Canadian can sign the Commons petition. You don't have to even be 18. You just have to be a Canadian citizen and an address. So, don't be afraid to, to send that Commons petition link to, your friends in Kenora, or your friends in Nova Scotia, or, your friends in London, Ontario, that is, and ask them to be part of this movement, because, it does have a huge amount of local support and local provenance, but there's a vested interest in keeping the Keewatin where it belongs from Canadians of all walks of life as well.
Thanks, Dan. Anything further to add there, Fred? You get the last word.
Well, thanks very much. And absolutely. If you go on our website at sskeewatin.com, there's a number of ways that you can support our organization specifically. And I have to say, there's some fabulous items in our gift shop for online purchase as well. That helps our effort. That keeps us in the fight. But most importantly, perhaps, it's just good to know that there's such a groundswell of support, not just immediately in the community, but far beyond that. And we're going to do everything we can to try to maximize that support and bring it to the table.
Well, I want to thank you both for joining us this evening. It's been great. I mean, in a fairly short time period, I think we've covered a really interesting and a topic that's not without its complexities. So thank you for doing that. You did that extremely well. I also want to thank the Friends of the Keewatin, who did so well to supply us with much of the footage and the images that we need to sort of help to visualize on your screens here this evening on Facebook, and for also to help promote the show by reaching out to their members and supporters. I want to thank all of you for tuning in this evening to hear about this amazing story about a beautiful piece of history in our area. And I want to just end with the reminder to go to the petition, certainly sign up. We've got about 10 days or so left for you to do that, to get in and sign that petition. Let's get those numbers up as high as we can. So when, and we will at a point after the petition closes, to meet with the minister and talk about how important the SS Keewatin is to our community. Now, as we usually and customarily close off our Facebook Live programs, I want to remind you that our offices are here to serve you. Admittedly, right at the moment, we're still in the red zone here in Simcoe, Muskoka, so we're not open sort of for drop-in on-demand service in the office. We're there to serve by phone and by email every day. Our staff are mostly working from home right at the moment. That will only change when we go into orange zone, and we'll open again. We can organize for some on a sort of appointment basis for whatever is necessary to meet you at the office for document exchange or anything of that nature. You can always reach us. Of course, David had the numbers up there for you, easy to find. Yeah, let's put them up there again. There we are. We have our 800 number, 268 265 6228. Reach us at that number, or bruce.stanton@parle.gc.ca. I want to thank our crew this evening, David Dalrymple, who is our producer and put much of the show together, and Curtis, who is my able hand on just about anything to do with the riding and acted as our moderator this evening. These things actually are fun to put together, but the end result of it is this roughly 45 minutes that we're in front of you doing our best to keep you informed on the relevant and important issues that are before us here in North Simcoe. So I want to say thank you for tuning in. Hope you're staying well, you and your family. All the best in the Easter holiday weekend that's coming up. And I'll bid you adieu for the evening. All the best, and we'll see you next time.